You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, best-selling author, professional speaker, and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, where we bring you some fabulous humans from across the globe, today is no different. Today is no different indeed, because we have some fabulous humans. And this one has a name that starts with W, because this wonderful human being right here has been a professional medical intuitive for 20 years. 20 years, folks. That's 2 whole decades in 2020, so it must have been 2000. And not only that, she's also the leading trainer for healthcare professionals based in LA and has effectively taught doctors, nurses, psychologists, therapists, energy workers, and health professionals how to use medical intuition in their practices. And you got to be wondering, wow, she teaches all those folks, and it doesn't even stop there. She actually had an early education that included participation in Louise Hay's renowned intimate living room healing sessions in Brentwood, California. So Louise Hay Fabulosity is in the house, and she's also taken that knowledge and has allowed it to lead to an intensive study in various energy modalities, including Usui Reiki, crystal healing, transcendental meditation, transformational coaching, and NLP. And it just keeps going on and on and on. And the beautiful thing about it is that the University of California's San Diego School of Medicine announced in 2019 that their collaboration with this guest right here for a research study on a medical intuition based on the remarkable results of her pilot study of the graduates of her program. So for those who haven't read the episode title, you're probably wondering who we got today. It's Miss WC herself, the world champion, Wendie Colter. How are you today, ma'am?
Hi, Dom. Thank you for it. What a great introduction. I appreciate that.
Oh,
Love-
yeah, gotta do the good introduction. That's usually the best part of the show, and then if we go down the rabbit hole where I occasionally pull out the tree joke.
I'm right there with you. Go for it. Whatever you got to do. I love your sense of humor. It's fabulous.
Oh, this is good. This is going to be a match made in heaven. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Well, as with all introductions, they're not allowed to be 40 days long, so mind filling in some cavities where I missed some things in the introduction, and tell us a bit about the wonderful Wendie.
Oh, sure, sure. Well, I have been teaching medical professionals now for about 10 years, and I have been a practicing medical intuitive for about 20 years. And, people usually ask me, how did you get started in all this? Because it's such an unusual field and not a very common one at the moment. Um, and I'll give you just a little bit about my background. And maybe some of your listeners can relate to this. I was always a very intuitive child and always had kind of unusual experiences with intuition. I just kind of knew what I knew because I knew it, and I couldn't have told you why I knew things, but I did. And many people have that experience, and they don't generally talk about it. It's not one of those things that people like to talk about because it seems a little strange, right? But I was, happy to be a strange child. And as I grew up, I kind of started reading a lot of books about metaphysics. And I did participate with Louise Hay and one of her very early work in Los Angeles with the HIV community. I was very fortunate to be part of her early group before she was really, Louise Hay as we know her today. And a good friend of mine invited me to her home to participate in kind of a meditation healing session. I'd never done anything like that before. I thought it was really odd and strange, but fascinating. And that sense of curiosity just kind of propelled me forward. And one of my really big points in my life history where I really knew something different was going on here was after I read a book by Dr. Deepak Chopra, which I'm sure is familiar to many of your listeners. Dr. Chopra's book, Quantum Healing, was a really interesting book where he talked about how he was helping his patients as an MD help their bodies cure themselves or of whatever issue was going on by using visualization. And that's in his book called Quantum Healing. I thought, well, this is really interesting stuff. How do you use visualization to heal your body? And I was curious about all of this. So what happened for me is that my body, not long after reading that, my body created a little tumor. Sort of interesting how life goes. And when
Oh
I went
man.
to I went to the doctor and I said, "What is this?" And she said, "It's benign. Don't worry about it. And we'll have a little surgery. We'll take it out. Nothing to worry about." And I said, "Great, I just read this really fascinating book by Dr. Deepak Chopra about people shrinking their tumors using their mind." And she gave me that look, that people give you when they think you're speaking another language, like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, she was so lovely. She said, "Well, it probably won't hurt you, so go ahead." And you had mentioned transcendental meditation. I was doing a lot of meditation at this time in my life of different kinds, and I had a daily practice. And so I wanted to use a visual image that, um, I like to laugh just like you, Dom. I like things that are funny. That's what I want in my life, right? Things
Oh
that are
good.
humorous and uplifting. And so I picked an image that I could use that would make me laugh. And I picked the image of little fizzy bubbles with big smiles on their faces and a little scrub brush. And it just made me giggle. And every day for about 2 weeks, I used that image in my mind to imagine that little tumor shrinking and dissolving, going away, just like Dr. Deepak Chopra talked about. And I didn't pay any attention to it other than that. And 2 weeks later, just in the pre-op exam, I hear my doctor, as she's examining me, I hear her gasp. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what have I done? Right? And she said, "What did you do? The tumor is like half the size of what it was." And it wasn't that kind of tumor. It wasn't going to shrink like that. And she said, "What on earth did you do?" And I said, "Well, I just used my mind." And, at the end after the surgery was successful and all that, I gave her a copy of Dr. Chopra's book and I said, "You better check this out." She thought it was amazing. But what happened was the tumor was about the size of a nickel and it shrunk to the size of a pea, about half, in that 2-week period. And that made me think, okay, the mind is powerful, mind body communication. What is this thing about? And I decided to sort of launch into a whole years and years of study of all kinds of different what now is being called mind body medicine or mind body therapies or things like that, where you use visual tools and visual skills like using your mind's eye to affect a change in your own physiology or someone. And so energy healing, there's a lot of that kind of practice in energy healing, and it was all very fascinating. And as I became an energy healer, I'm giving you the whole story, Dom. You're getting the whole 9 yards here. Is that all right?
Oh, that is a-okay with me.
You can
I love
stop
your
me
voice. This
anytime.
is even better.
Well, I love talking about this because the more I talk about this, the more people come up to me and say, I've had a similar experience, or something else has happened that they've been able to use mind body, visualization with, and they didn't know who to talk to about it, right? So it kind of launched me into a whole lifetime, really, of study of energy medicine. What is this thing called energy medicine? What is what people call spontaneous remission? What's really going on there? And as an energy healer, I noticed that all my energy healing, colleagues were sending me their tough cases, and doctors were calling me on the phone because for not only could I see into my clients' bodies the same way I could sort of visualize into mine, but I could also see the life history, what was causing this issue to manifest in this particular way. And that information turns out was very, very valuable to people. It helped them get a handle on their healing process, and it really supported their healing journey. And that's why I decided to teach this practice, because for me, it was a natural progression of just working with intuition and working with visual energy and things like that. And it became very natural to me. And so I wanted to teach the healthcare profession because this is the place where I believe healthcare can really advance, and it can support um, every kind of healthcare journey certainly for patients and clients, but definitely for the doctors, the physicians, and the practitioners, who are working with people. They can get more information. They don't have to call me. They can actually learn how to do it themselves. And I've been very blessed um, to have had the opportunity to teach at some of the top schools and education centers in the country, and I'm still doing that, and they're interested and eager to learn. It's been quite a journey.
Oh yeah, that's right. A journey north, I bet.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right. It's kind of I guess for some folks it may be strange, but it's a time of awakening, if that's probably the best way to describe it, because a lot of folks are really tapping into their sixth sense and their spiritual side and really opening up to alternate ways of doing things. And it's good that we have folks like you out there who actually diving deep into that and actually have tons of experience with that and helping people to realize, you know what, there's another way to do this and there's another way to really change the trajectory of my health.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I found that in this work, the most important thing for people, because I do this work as a medical intuitive separate from my work as a healer, because I may not know if my particular healing skill is the right thing for that person that I'm, working with. I need to check that out. I need to check to see what's going on in their physical body, what's going on in their energy, what's going on in their life history. And I do that by looking at their physical body. It tells me everything I need to know. And when we tested this process with my graduate students, we found we had some pretty outstanding results, Dom. And if you don't mind me talking about that, I'd love your listeners to know that what we did was we tested our medical intuitive graduates. And these people had been in about 9 months to a year's worth of study with me. And we had them work with people that they've never met, that they didn't know what the background was, and that's important in medical intuition to not have too much information. We don't want we really don't want it to influence us, right? We want to be able to just to see whatever's there. And what we found was that there are about 67 people who took this survey after their session, and here's what they said. They said 94% of them agreed or strongly agreed that the medical intuitive accurately located and evaluated their primary health issue. 94%, we thought that was a pretty good number. 98% agreed that the medical intuitive accurately described life experiences that corresponded to their health issues. Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
Yeah. Now, about half of those people that took the survey after their session had received a definitive medical diagnosis from their healthcare provider, about half. And of that half, 94% rated the medical intuitive consistent or totally consistent with that diagnosis. Now, we didn't expect to see that. We asked the question not knowing, what would come of it, because of course we don't take a health history beforehand. We just take a look and we see whatever we see and whatever the body wants to show us. And we came out with that spectacular result, plus others. There were many other results of that survey. I sent all of that information over to a good friend of mine who is um, at the University of San Diego School of Medicine. And he runs a research center there in integrative medicine, brilliant man. And he looked at all that and he said, well, now we have to do a gold standard study, the way that, scientists do it, not just a survey, but a gold standard study on medical intuition. And I looked in sort of the research on intuition, of which there is much, by the way, in healthcare. Intuition actually is studied, but not medical intuition. That's never been studied, not to this degree. And so we're very excited about this, and we're actually fundraising for this. So if your listeners are interested, they can certainly contact me about that.
Beautiful, Beautiful indeed. That's right. The power of intuition.
Hmm.
So how do you keep that strong at a high level? Because I'm pretty sure you might have to work that like a muscle to keep it active, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how I describe it. Everybody has intuition, and this is a real common misconception for people out there, but it's something that we have as human beings. We have intuition. It's part of our imagination, our imaginative process. And everybody, when I talk about the kinds of intuition there are out there, it falls into a few categories. The first category, if you don't mind me going off on this one here, because it's an interesting topic for people to kind of think about how they actually use intuition themselves. Most people understand that thing about having a gut feeling or a hunch, right? We all
Oh
have
yeah.
that. Yeah, that's common. And that is actually a kind of intuition called claircognizance, meaning clear knowing. You just know it. Right? When they talk about gut feelings, hunches, women's intuition, all that stuff, that's actually a kind of intuition. And you can actually build that if you choose to, like working that muscle or like learning a new language. There's another one that a lot of people really relate to, Dom, and that is clear sentience or clear feeling. And that is feeling other people's emotions. Well, we know how to do that, right? If you think about empathy or compassion, that is the act of feeling someone else's emotions, right? You kind of relate to it, you resonate with it. That is a kind of intuition, believe it or not. That's called clairsentience, and you can certainly build that one. And the kind of intuition that I use is something that we have a very good word for. I used it earlier, and that is clear seeing, meaning using your mind's eye, using visualization. And that technique is not very well known or studied, but it is what I use for medical intuition. It's what I teach. It's a way for people to view the physical body, view the biofield, which is the auric field, the chakra system, things like that, and view their life story as well using this visual intuition. That definitely takes some learning. It's something that everybody can do if they choose to learn it. I The way I talk about it, Dom, is that it's like learning a new language. If you wanted to learn Italian, what would you do? You'd go take a class, you'd go get a Rosetta Stone, you'd go do something, and you learn how to speak Italian. Same thing about using visual intuition or any of the other intuitive skills. You would learn how to develop it. And once you learn how to develop it, it's yours. It's like riding a bike, you can stop and start however you want, but it can really help you in your life depending on, what your goal is for using this skill.
Ah, beautiful indeed. Beautiful indeed. I'm glad you brought up women's intuition because that was one of the first things that popped to my mind. I'm like, all right, yes, indeed. She's got an edge already. She's probably got a third eye
Well,
and all
women
other nonsense that is really good sense.
it's been very misunderstood for centuries, of course, right? It seems weird and odd and all the rest of it. But once you start practicing your intuition, you find, well, it's really natural. Here's the thing. Everybody has had the experience of thinking about someone they love, right? Their family member or friend or their partner. And the next thing you know, that person texts you or calls you or, emails you. Everyone seems to have had that experience, and they say, oh, it was such a funny coincidence. Well, what if it isn't a coincidence? What if it's intuition, right? That would be claircognizance. What if you just have a knowing, that someone wanted to talk to you and you call? Sometimes people say that, I was just thinking about you. I thought I'd just pick up the phone or I'd text you or email, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yes,
not just
indeed.
women.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely right. Because sometimes we get those hunches too, and then out of nowhere, whether it be like a day later, if I
Yeah.
procrastinated on it, next thing you know, I know I get an email or a text from that person, like, oh, okay, yeah. Yes, indeed. I probably should have called this person a day beforehand as opposed to procrastinating on it.
Yeah, everybody seems to recognize that. And let me just tell you, Dom, I've taught a lot of skeptics, people who don't believe that this kind of thing can even exist. All they have to do is invest in the learning of it, and the time, just a little bit of time to practice, just like learning a new language or learning how to play an instrument. You've got to practice, and they find that they can do it. And you know, honestly, it's one of those things, just like anything, that once you practice it and you learn it and you have a good educational process for it, you can really pick it up and use it. And I'm very happy to say that the students who are using it in their practices, in their medical and healthcare practices, are getting so much value out of it. They're finding all kinds of great uses for it, and mostly because it gives them that holistic view. We hear the word holistic a lot in healthcare these days, but what does that really mean? Well, a holistic view is a comprehensive perspective, right? Not just for whatever issue you have, but also for your mind, your body, your spiritual well-being. All of these come into play with medical intuition, and a qualified medical intuitive should be able to give you that 360 view. And it really shines when people aren't healing despite the practitioner's best efforts. And that's not uncommon, is it? When people just aren't healing, right? Their protocol's not working, things aren't working. Well, medical intuition can help with that. I'm not telling you that it's the ultimate end to that, but it can absolutely help provide insight in many different ways from the perspective of mind, body, and spirit, in terms of healing and the healing journey and the healing process. So it's very good. It really works on all those levels. And how it does is it brings awareness to the surface. And that's really important, because the body has its own kind of conscious awareness. Believe it or not, the body sort of has its own awareness. And sometimes we just don't listen to it. In fact, most of the time, people don't listen to it because they're not trained in how to do that. They don't know how to do that. And medical intuition is that bridge. We build that bridge for the client or for the patient to understand what it is their body's asking for. That's hugely valuable for people, I found over the years, and certainly can help in healthcare without question.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And I think the high burnout rate across the country
Hmm.
is probably the main cause of folks not tapping into their intuitions. Like folks are working too hard just to keep their head above water metaphorically and just to
Yeah.
keep the bills paid. And then it's like intuition, like forget that. Like gotta pay this more. You gotta pay these student loans. And then especially with the doctors, it's like, all right, let's see if this pill could work. All right. Oh, that didn't work. All right. Let's try this tree over here.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're not wrong. I got to tell you, the one of the best things about medical intuition and working with doctors, and I've been working with doctors for many, many years, is they sometimes hit a wall, with their with their plan, their care plan, and they just don't know what to do for someone. And this is where medical intuition can really step in and help and support. And for the patients and the clients, I work with people every day who've gone to a dozen doctors, and they haven't had the relief that they've been hoping for. And that's not a slam on Western medicine by any stretch. I mean, we have these skills, we have these tools, we have these abilities, but guess what? There are people who fall outside of the margins all the time. And they're the ones that are really looking to find an answer to an issue that may not be best answered by standard Western medicine, or acupuncture or some other kind of medicine. So what a medical intuitive can do is kind of look at that whole spectrum and see, well, what potentially could help here. And what's really fascinating about this process is I learn so much as I do this. I need to know anatomy. A medical intuitive needs to know anatomy, but the body has so much to say about things that I would never know. So I can't have any biases when I go in as a medical intuitive. I can't say, well, the pill is better than the surgery, or the alternative care is better than the pill. I can't say that because I don't know until I look and listen to the body and tell it, so it can tell me what it has to say. That's really important. And I feel like a lot of people have tunnel vision, certainly in healthcare, and they're only seeing it through their own lens, which is fine. That's their education, but there's a lot more to look at. when it comes to mind, body, spirit wellness.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And it's great that you mentioned how tongue tied. Medical intuitives should actually know human anatomy because it's
Oh, yeah.
darn true. It's like it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. You have to know. You have to know what, many medical intuitives, if they're not licensed, like doctors or nurses or whatever, and they haven't had that background in my program, they're going to learn. They're going to learn what they need to know so that they can look at, someone's liver or whatever and know what it's supposed to do. What is a healthy liver supposed to look like? How's it supposed to act? And it's not 4 years of anatomy. It's, people shouldn't be worried about that. It's enough so that you can start asking the question of the body and hearing the answer, getting the answer. And I see the answer, and that's how I train people. It's like looking at an MRI, a functional MRI in my mind's eye. I can see the body that way. And I can also see like a little movie of life circumstances that might have led to this imbalance.
Ah, so since you have this wonderful intuitive power developed, so do you ever just take a normal walk through the day and you just see people walking around? You're like, oh God, what is going on with them?
Yeah, people ask me that. you know, listen here, let me just tell you one thing about that. Intuitive people, they have what you like, no energetic boundaries, many of them. And
Exactly.
so they can walk into a crowded room and feel everybody's energy. And just at the end of the day, they feel like they're just squashed grapes, they're just out. And that's a common experience for many, many intuitives, not just medical intuitives. And I have to tell you that I teach a very specific method in energetic boundaries because we need to be able to take care of our own energy and not soak in everybody else's, or we're not going to be able to do our job. And I have to tell you, when I teach nurses, especially, and I teach a lot of nurses, this is one of the things they're like, well, this is worth the price of admission right there, because they deal with people who are in probably their worst, states, right? People who are in the hospital, people who are ill, people who are hurting or in pain or whatever. And they're wonderful, compassionate people, and they really find that they can take on those burdens. Psychologists have this issue too. And it doesn't matter what kind of training you have. If you haven't been trained in intuitive or energetic, I call it energy hygiene, keeping your own
Ooh.
energy clear and clean, and so that you're not soaking up other people's stuff, so that you can really work at peak performance in your own energetic state. And this is such an important skill, Dom, that I actually have a short 1-day workshop. It's like a 6-hour workshop about it that's open to everybody. Anybody can take this workshop who wants to learn how to develop their own energy hygiene, their own way to kind of keep their energy clean and clear, and also how to have a dialogue with their own physical bodies. So if they're having a physical issue, that they can learn how to tune in and have a conversation and get some information from their own physical bodies for their own self-healing. That is a really important workshop. That's called Medical Intuition for Healing, and I teach it a few times a year, and I'm going to create a self-study program with it. It's coming up soon here for those listeners who are listening right now, coming up in February. But please check out the website. I also have guided meditations on the website that are free to everybody. And those have some skills and tools as well in how to ground your energy, how to keep your energy buffered and clear, get a boundary up. And those are really short. They're about 5 or 7 minutes, and they're free, a lot of fun. And I put those up because people were asking for something that they can just try and see how it feels, see how it feels to try to work with your own intuitive energy. It's fascinating. People love it. So your listeners are certainly welcome to check that out.
Heck, check it out myself too. Energy hygiene. That's a new one. Like, all right.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And I guess it's not only how we take care of our physical bodies or temples, but also the spirits or
Yeah.
themselves too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, how I would talk about the spirituality of it is it's a tricky thing to talk about because everybody has their own definition of that. But I can tell you that intuition is, I wouldn't call it a gift, even though people do. I call it a natural human trait, but many of us don't use it. And when we learn how to use it, forgive me, but people start feeling more connected to their spirituality. I've noticed that. Not that I teach that, because I don't. It's non-denominational, but people say that they have more of a connection to whatever their spirituality is because they're using a connection to something that we really don't have good language for. And it's beautiful. It's very healing, put it that way. So it's lovely to see how this develops for people, how they sort of connect to their own spirituality, whatever it means to them. And I think that's just lovely.
That's right. That's right indeed. So
Mm.
not only energy hygiene, but also being connected to spirit. So is this all going to be in an upcoming book soon as well?
I'm writing a book now. And, I have a lot of material on the website about all this. People can read and take a listen to those guided meditations and join us for any of the talks or the workshops. And if anyone out there is a wellness professional, someone who's been doing wellness work for at least a year, as certified or licensed, well, they're welcome to take the program, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. But there's always ways to develop this for yourself. And, I got to say, Dom, it kind of goes under the big umbrella of self-care, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Self-care, taking care of who you are, what you need for you. And we have a lot of trouble with that as humans. We're taking care of a lot of other people before we take care of ourselves. And, that's not really the way it works so well. Works better to make sure you've got some self-care going on too.
Heck yeah, because we're like walking wells. I mean, we got water to give to folks metaphorically, but folks keep drawing from it after a while, and then you're left empty, and you're like, oh, darn, there goes
Mm,
my hydration.
yeah, it's true. Yeah, we really do. And one of the wonderful things about medical intuition, at least the way I practice it, certainly the way I teach it, is that we have to stay grounded. We have to have our energy, shielding our buffering up. We have to take care of our own energetic hygiene first. And that really helps us all, have more to give, just to have more to give ourselves, more to give our loved ones, more to give the world. And people report back that that's what's happening for them. It's really fun to see that. It really works that way.
That's right. Especially against those folks who just walk up to you with their hands outstretched and just say, drink it in, man.
That's really lovely. Yeah.
And you're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people have all kinds of, needs and agendas and all that, and it's all fine. We're human beings what are we, spiritual beings having a human experience? That's the phrase. That's the old way people used to say it. I think it's a lovely way to think about it. Spiritual beings having a human experience, and the human experience is as varied as it gets. One of the things that I look at, Dom, in people's energy is early life experience, because so much of the imbalances in our lives come from early life trauma. And I know you've talked to psychologists on your show and people who work with mental health care. Well, that a lot of that comes from these early life traumas that, even if we've kind of worked on them, as we do, sometimes they have this effect where later in life they can manifest into a physical imbalance. And that is a very interesting trajectory to look at. It's an interesting line to see. And I often see that in people's energies. And that's fascinating because there's, most of the time, even if people are familiar with now, by the way, I didn't make any of that up. There's research being done, a lot of it right now in particular, on something called adverse childhood experiences. Have you heard about that? They call it ACEs, ACES. And
Huh.
your listeners can look that up. There's a lot of material online where they're noticing that people who've had trauma in their childhoods have had later in life experiences of all kinds of things, anything from cancer to heart disease to, obesity, depression, things like that. And that's research that's going on right now. And that's something that when I read these things, I'm like, well, medical intuitives have been seeing that for centuries. So we know that there's a correlation there. We see it. The other thing that's being looked at now in science is something called epigenetics. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that term a couple
Yeah.
times.
Well, what that science is about is, well, if something happened to your grandmother, your great grandfather, and there was some traumatic event, and certainly there has been down history, of course, then there's something that happens in the DNA and it gets kind of passed forward. And there's these little triggers or like on-off switches in your DNA, and it can trigger and it can cause, an effect in you. And it's fascinating to look at that. And if your listeners want to go up online, they can look for epigenetics, and they can look at that science. And again, a medical intuitive, as myself, I look at that and I go, well, no kidding. you know, that makes sense. I've been looking at that for a long time. Stuff in the ancestral line. Yes, of course. Trauma events get carried forward in the DNA. It's fascinating. So all of this stuff is really interesting to look at. And from the medical intuitive perspective, that's what we're looking at anyway. We're looking at all of that stuff to see what's going on in someone's physical body and biofield and mental, emotional, spiritual, etc.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about indeed. Hey, again, funny enough, you mentioned how medical intuitives have been knowing this for centuries. Do you think it could be that folks are just trying to update research as opposed to doing new research? Because I feel like sometimes stuff may be hidden, and we got so many folks that quote unquote wake up to their own intuitive gifts that they actually kind of have to go back and either dig up some old research and see if it matches up with what's happening, or they may just go a totally different route and end up finding something totally new.
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that in healthcare, when I got into this teaching, medical professionals, I was really interested in doing this because when I would give a talk, I would have these doctors come up to me and sort of whisper quietly and say, like, come over here, I want to talk to you, and say, I just had these experiences in my career where I just knew what was going on with someone, but I had no evidence base to know that. They didn't have the research, it's like they just had a feeling, right, or a hunch. And I said, well, tell those people, well, that's your intuition. And they say, I can't talk about it to my colleagues. They'll laugh at me. They'll think I'm crazy. And this is why I actually really love scientific research. Believe it or not, I love it because it gives us the empirical data, the evidence base that this thing is real. And you have to let's think about where acupuncture was, 30, 40 years ago. It was considered like, what are you talking about? You know? It wasn't part of our culture, but it is now because there's been an evidence base, there's been research and scientific evidence about this particular method working. And we see that with Reiki now, which is a wonderful energy skill. We see it being, here's what we're seeing, Dom, this is really exciting. We're seeing doctors prescribing yoga and prescribing, lifestyle changes and energy work and things like that. This is new, okay? Now, I maybe not all over the country, but in certain parts of the country. And this is called integrative medicine and functional medicine. And these are two very strong movements that have developed because people have been asking for it. People are saying to their doctors, I took this pill and then I went to the acupuncturist and I took some herbs and guess what? I'm healing finally.
Oh, yeah.
And so the doctors are going, well, okay, we better figure out what's going on here. And so it's really interesting to see how well this has now come into the culture, and we're seeing people really interested in, alternative, used to be called alternative practices. And I love that because from a medical intuitive perspective, it's all appropriate, it's all valid. And I have to look at your body, say, Dom, and I have to see, well, what's going to work for you? And let's see what we can do. And because of what I do, I tell my clients to take this information to their primary healthcare provider and say, okay, I have some information here. What do you think? Shall we give it a try? And that's how it works great for people who are non-licensed, care providers. They can, they, our job is to make sure that our client follows through and takes it to their healthcare provider. And that's how medicine changes, right? That's how research advances. That's how we find out about things like acupuncture or, naturopathy, herbs and supplements and things like that. And that's what really helps people develop healing protocols that will work specifically for them, because we don't want to put people in a cookie cutter, right? We don't want to say, well, you have this, therefore this is the only thing that can work. I talk to people every day whose doctors have said this is the only thing that can work, and they're like, well, guess what? It didn't work for me. Now what? Well, there's a lot more out there, so we want to take a look.
I guess it kind of goes back to early in the magical chat about the holistic approach and
Mm-hmm.
just going back to basic things. And heck, maybe just from a lack of movement, because like with the yoga, it gets your body moving and helps you
Mm.
with the deep breathing. And folks
Mm-hmm.
nowadays forget to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, breathe deeply, like in all up in that belly right there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Stress is probably the biggest issue that I see, honestly. And that's something that everybody needs to know how to help themselves mitigate in their own lives. Meditation is a terrific way, yoga, walking, exercise, deep breathing, so many ways to do it, but many people feel they can't fit it into their lifestyle. And I say, everyone can sit in their car and take a deep breath, park your car before you go into the office and take 3 slow, deep breaths and calm down that vagus nerve, the one that runs through your body. Because if you start getting stressed out, you have to know that is your body's warning signal that sounds like it's like overloading an electrical circuit or something. You've really got to find ways to calm down and de-stress, put it that way, de-stress. It's a tough thing, we live in very interesting times, and we're in charge of that for ourselves, and our bodies want that. They really need that help.
That's right. Heck, even singing a song too to de-stress.
Mm.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's right, folks. Fight off the stress. That's right. Take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Think about a Teletubby.
Wow, that's true, huh? Teletubbies knew how to de-stress. That's funny.
Yep. At least it's something random enough to get your mind off of whatever is about to give you that stress. It's like, yeah, just imagine a Teletubby getting its belly poked.
Well, what's interesting is that stress is actually sets off hormone changes in the body. It's like it triggers hormones, and stress like cortisol and things like that really do, they're like chemicals that flood your body, adrenaline, cortisol, things like that. And that's not, and that's what everyone can tell you. And what you want to know with that is that it's not healthy. It's good if you're running if you're out there doing your exercise, sure. But if you're just sitting around reading Facebook or watching television, getting stressed out, stop, pause, take a moment, deep breaths. On my website, which by the way, I'm not sure we mentioned, it's thepracticalpath.com. That's 3 words, thepracticalpath.com. And there's exercises on there, in the guided meditation section, just to de-stress, find ways to just cool that down. And that helps your body really work much better.
That's right. And no yoga pants required for this either.
Not at all.
That's right. It'll be a nice touch, but depending on the person. But hey, yeah, no yoga pants required. So definitely check that out. Like a library book. That's right. Heck, maybe check it out like 5 library books.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. Well, all of this magical, fabulous knowledge. So if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in the current year of 2020 with all of your amassed knowledge and intuitive six pack, what advice would you give to yourself?
If I was 25 again, I would say, get your butt meditating, girl. In my 20s, I was still not quite there with it all. I was just kind of playing with it as, different ways of thinking and looking at stuff. But if I'd started a regular meditation practice in my 20s, I feel like I would have a lot more handle on things. I would have moved maybe, along a little faster, and I would have understood myself a little better. Meditation, Dom, is one of those wonderful loving gifts you can give yourself, whatever that means to you, however that. Some people can just sit quietly in their backyard or in the park under a tree and take some deep breaths, and that can be meditation. But self-care and meditation, or things that work with self-care, I wish I had done more when I was in my 20s. That's the information I would give myself.
Ah, fabulous right there. Fabulous right there. That's right. Get your
Mm.
butt meditating.
Yep.
That's right.
Don't wait. Take the time for yourself now, because, when we're in our 20s, there's just so much going on usually, and people have so many questions, and we're trying to figure out who we are, and we don't give enough to ourselves usually. And that's really a skill that can just take you through life and really support your life.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Support your life. And don't do it on life support either.
What did you say? Don't do what?
Yeah, support your life. Just don't do it on life support.
Don't do it on life support, correct? Oh, that's great.
That's right. All the wordplay today.
It's good.
That's right.
Well, laughter, I don't know if you know this, Dom, but I think you should know this. Laughter is very healing, and you don't seem to have any problem with that. So I hope your listeners enjoy this, because we really should laugh more too.
Oh, yeah, you should definitely check out the Jane Ransom episode. That one was full of laughter.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah. Especially with random books walking around with red stilettos strutting their knowledge.
Yeah, well, it's important that we don't, get too bogged down in life, and laughter is really the best medicine, isn't it? That's what they say.
Oh, yeah, I agree with them. I laugh every day of my life. I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
it doesn't always have to be at something else. It could be at myself. It's like, oh, darn. Wow. All right. I am a genius. Yeah. All right.
I love it. That's great.
Yes, indeed. And what's also great with 7Rs is your fabulous site and all your programs. So, one more time for the folks who didn't catch it the first time, what's the best way for folks to keep in contact with you and all the magical Wendie wonders that you're doing?
Well, my website is called The Practical Path, 3 words altogether, thepracticalpath.com. And you can reach me through the website, and you can take a look at our guided meditations. Please take a look at the upcoming Medical Intuition for Healing workshop, which is a 6-hour workshop in how to create that mind-body connection for your own self-healing and self-care. And also the full program, which I teach twice a year, and that is for wellness professionals. So anybody from any wellness perspective is welcome to take a look at that. And that's a 9-month program that I teach twice a year. And I'm happy to answer any questions for your listeners as well.
Oh, there you have it, folks. That's right, baby. That's right. It's thepracticalpath.com, not the crazy path, not the diluted path, not the off-beaten path. It is the practical path. That's right, keeping it practical indeed, and it's powerful. That's right. You too can have 8-pack medical intuitive abs. That's right.
Great.
Yes, indeed. So, any parting words for the folks still listening, Wendie?
Well, start paying attention to your intuition, And again, there's a lot of stuff on the website about that, information about that. And the more you pay attention to your intuition, the more your intuition can kind of help you navigate your life. So that would be something I would recommend to everybody.
Hey there, you superstar. Thanks a bunch for making it this far in the podcast. Hope you really enjoyed it. Heck, if you made it this far, that means you really enjoyed it. Be sure to shoot the guest an email or head over to the social media pages and leave them a nice response that you heard them on the Going North podcast, so that way they can continue to be inspired to do great things. And be sure to share this podcast with others that you think would enjoy it as well, because we want to inspire as many people as possible to live their dreams, embrace them, and to do something positive.